to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 666. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we are on a summer holiday for the next 2 weeks. That's SPaMCAST 666 and 667. Today, we're featuring an interview that was released on December 27th, 2015 with Gerald Jerry Weinberg. Gerald Weinberg is the author of more than 100 books, including the best-selling Secrets of Consulting, another nonfiction series, and the ever-popular Women in Power novels. Jerry died on August 7th, 2018. I really wish I had more interviews with Jerry. This is a fantastic interview with the grandfather of Agile. I hope you enjoy it. See you next week. We discussed quality and how quality is related to value. A talk with Jerry is always profound. However, I must admit that Jerry's humor caused me to laugh more times than I can count during our conversation. Gerald Jerry Weinberg is author of more than 100 books, including the best-selling Secrets of Consulting, other nonfiction series, and the ever-popular Women of Power novels. He is a principal in the international consulting firm of Weinberg & Weinberg. The Festschrift, The Gift of Time, honors his work for his 75th birthday. His website may be found at www.geraldmweinberg.com and www.thewomenofpower.org. Are you ready for a chat with Jerry Weinberg? It's time for the interview. Jerry Weinberg, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Glad to be here, Tom.
Jerry, in your current book, Errors, you suggest that quality is not the same as the absence of errors. Why is that true? And why wouldn't those two things be synonymous?
Well, they can be related, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let me give you two examples. One is I have programs that I use that have errors in them, but I still find them useful and of great value to me. And I'm sure that you have the same thing. Some things just have a value, they're quality, and so the little glitches, you just ignore them. It crashes the machine, you restart, whatever. In the game business, for example, they just call some of their errors features. And it displays some strange thing on the background. It's okay. People play, people pay money, and they sell millions of copies. So you can have errors where there's quality, value to you. On the other hand, you can have a piece of software that has no errors in it, but it is of no use to you. So, for example, you apparently are using a Windows machine. You spoke about the blue screen of death. I used a Mac, so if you have a piece of software that only runs on Windows, it has no value to me at all. Its quality is zero, all right? Or I could have a piece of Mac software that just does something I'm not interested in, like the software that teaches me how to put on makeup, say, and there's a piece of software like that. I don't use makeup, and I don't intend to. So, on the other hand, to somebody who does makeup, an actor or a woman or who does makeup, that could be very high quality to them and of no quality to me. So
is quality and value then related?
Well, I could have a piece of software that I really would like to use, supposedly does something that I want, but it has errors in it that destroy that quality. Okay? So in that sense, they're related. You can have errors that may mean you have no quality or actually negative quality. It could destroy your data, whatever. But that's the absence of errors doesn't guarantee anything about quality. The presence of errors tends to diminish quality, but other things tend to diminish quality as well, right? poor interface, which may not be an error, but it may not be adapted to me. For example, let's say the interface is only in Portuguese. My Portuguese is very poor or non-existent, so it's not an error in the software itself. It may be an error in the marketing of it or whatever. Or you could call that an error in the specifications for what they're building. But so they are related, but they're absolutely not the same. You can eliminate all the errors in a useless program, and it doesn't add anything to its quality.
How would you define quality? I mean, quality is obviously something that we all talk about all the time. It feels like it's sort of an amorphous sort of concept. How do you define quality?
Well, okay. So there have been a number of definitions that don't work. People have tried, and they don't work very well. So, for example, one of the most popular ones is that quality is meeting specifications. Okay? But I had a client a few years ago where software developer and the customer were in the same room with me, and they had a requirement that said the response time, the average response time on the system should be under 2 seconds, and for transactions. And the developer said, we have statistics that show we've made that requirement. And so they met the requirement. And the customer said, well, but every once in a while, it takes an hour. It averages out under 2 seconds. Most of the time, it's instantaneous. But it's not okay for us. We cannot have it do that, even occasionally, for our customers. And so it has no quality to us. And the developer says, yes, but it meets requirements, and that's the definition of quality. No, it's not the definition of quality. Quality, it turns out, is value to somebody. All right? If you're willing to pay for it, either with money or with your time or some other form of payment, then it has quality to you to the extent that you're willing to pay for it. So I offer you a piece of software. What would you like? You said you like to watch cartoons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's some software that shows you cartoons, all right? And how much would you be willing to pay for it? You try it out, maybe.
Yeah.
You say, well, I've seen all those cartoons, so I'm not willing to buy it at all. So it has no quality to you. To the next person who hasn't seen them, might say, oh, they're really funny, I like them, and I'd be willing to pay $10 for that. So that's sort of a measure of its quality to that person at that time. See, a year ago, you may not have seen those cartoons, and you would have paid $10.
Right.
At that time, the quality was one thing. Now it's different, right? And that's the only definition that works for me, and it's inconvenient. Developers don't like to think that quality is different to different people at different times, because I'd like to make some software, fix it, never modify it. Everybody will love it. People will pay for it. But even if they'll pay for it, they don't pay an infinite amount, or they don't pay the same amount. I give you a wonderful cartoon program. It has lots of new cartoons, and I said the price is $50,000. Do you think you would buy it?
Probably not.
Probably not. This doesn't have that much quality, right, to you. So does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Because the definition is sort of in the eye of the beholder, the eye of the person who assigns value to it, how can you implement that in a software development organization might be serving a wide range of customers?
Well, yeah, that's the question that has always bothered us. But it's, like any other thing we provide to people, like a meal, right? Different people like different things. And if you're having a banquet, a conference with a meal, and people say, what should the menu be? And you say, well, everybody wants something different. No, we can't afford that, right? It's not. So when I'm speaking, like if I'm keynoting a conference, people used to ask me all the time, well, we're speaking after dinner, so you get to choose the menu. And I'm thinking, right? So there's 3,000 people there, and it's like developing a piece of software. How am I supposed to come up with a menu that they're all going to like the same amount, right? Impossible. So, and I don't want to be responsible because some of the people, whatever I choose, are not going to like it, right? So what I learned to do, I say, okay, if you insist that I choose the menu, then I want liver and onions. And then they start hemming and hawing and coughing and, oh my. And finally they said, well, okay, well, we'll choose the menu, right? Because they know that most people don't like liver and onions. I might love it. It might be my highest quality meal, right? And when developing software, we do the same thing you do in choosing a banquet meal. You, first of all, try to survey people and find out what most of the people want. If there's some specially important person, like the president of the United States is going to be there or something, and you know that he or she loves liver and onions, then you maybe provide some special exception for somebody. One person can have liver and onions if they choose. You give choices. One of the things that I said something sort of unfavorable about Windows, but it's Windows is a great system that a lot of people love. What I don't like about it is it doesn't give me the choices that I like. And in some cases, and in other cases, it gives me too many choices. So you can make a mistake in that direction too with your software, right? But basically, you have to start with the attitude, we can't please everybody equally all the time. You must accept that if you're designing anything, a meal, a bridge, a house, right? Clothing, anything. And we haven't accepted that in software to any great extent. And I don't know, people have this belief in perfection, and they tend to get in the computer business, as I did when I was a young guy. I thought the computer would never make mistakes, right? So it couldn't be perfect. And of course, that was really dumb, as we know now. But I've learned that you just have to accept a certain number of errors. A certain number of people aren't going to like what you do. I've had clients where the manager decided to give everybody $1,000 cash bonus one day. And some people absolutely hated that. And you want to ask me why? I don't necessarily understand it. And one of the guys, for example, said to me, well, if I accept this bonus, he's going to expect me to work overtime. Right? For example, right? I mean, well, maybe he was going to expect overtime. Maybe he wasn't. But for that guy, just handing him $1,000 was not okay. All right, so you learn that. If you don't learn that, you're never going to be happy as a software developer. Some people are not going to like. Same way writing books. I've got books that hundreds of thousands of people have read and wonderful reviews, and every once in a while I get a note from somebody that says, I got one a few months ago where a guy said, if my company had not paid for this book, I would burn it.
Oh, my.
Yeah. I mean, there's one person out there who knows why he wants to burn my book. I don't know. And back when that happened, it was actually a few years ago now, I was very upset by it, and finally I got my head on straight and I thought, well, gosh, I make 99,000 people happy and one person doesn't like it. Well, then he doesn't have to use it,
Right.
And I always give a money back guarantee. If you buy my book or go to one of my workshops and you don't think you've got value for your money, see, this is another place the value definition helps, then I give you a refund. No questions asked. I mean, I'll ask if you explain why if you want to, so I'll know, but you don't have to explain anything. And it's very, very helpful to understand that,
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty visceral reaction, though, to anything, especially a book and concepts. But I guess maybe those are the things that people have the most visceral reactions about.
And they certainly do have visceral reactions to software.
We use all sorts of words to describe errors, and people might even call them opportunities, which makes me a little crazy, but defects, errors, just all sorts of words. Does what we call an error matter?
Yes, it can. For example, I don't like the term bugs. I mean, I've had literally to deal with real bugs in some computer work that we've done. As I think Grace Hopper did, and that's where she got the term originally. She found an actual insect in the machine. And I've had that experience too. When we did a part of the space tracking network in Bermuda, we were really on the beach, and we had all kinds of bugs under the floor. And they were bothering us until we let some chameleons in there too. And they ate the bugs. So, but no, I mean, bug is very evocative and so on, but it makes you think at some level that these are not something you caused, right? And also the reaction, actually, if we would use it better, then it might be helpful. For instance, if you live in New York City and you come into your kitchen, you switch on the light and you see this big cockroach running across the counter, right? And you pick up some instrument and smash it. And then you turn back to your friends and you say, I just killed the bug in the kitchen. Well, you see the psychology there. Any New Yorker will just laugh at that because there's no such thing as one cockroach in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no such thing as one bug in a program. The extermination model could be useful, but people don't use it that way. They use it to kind of say, well, I'm not responsible, of course. My neighbor has cockroaches in his kitchen, and they come running into my apartment. Something else happened. We got this error in the program, this bug in the program, but it's not me. Well, really successfully eliminating bugs, eliminating errors, is to take responsibility. Maybe not 100%, right? But certainly you always have to imagine that you have something to do with it. Otherwise, you won't do anything about it. So I don't like bugs. Other words that diminish things like glitch, which says, well, maybe I had something to do with it, but it's not that important. Well, figuring out the importance of an error is a big job and an important job, because if you have several errors you have to deal with, how useful is it to do this one versus another one, and so on. So in my book, I have all sorts of words that people have used. Error is not perfect, right? Because that can mean a lot of things too, but I haven't found anything better. The word fault, which is used in a lot of the technical literature, kind of goes the opposite way of bug. It makes you sound like you're to blame in some sense for producing something like this. And blame doesn't really help anybody get rid of these errors. So it's an error, could be a mistake, whatever, that would be another word. Just deal with it. That's what I'm trying to do with the choice of words.
Well, and I think I agree with you just from a psychological point of view. If you don't feel responsibility, you probably won't pursue it. If you feel like it's a blame scenario, you're going to try to hide it. I mean, so there's all sorts of bad behaviors that a word can induce.
Now, of course, there are some people, it doesn't matter what word you use, and they will, you'll say errors, and they'll say, I don't make errors. I've run into a few of those people, and they're just not suitable for the software business. Okay? If you think you can be perfect, then you're in the wrong business. I have no more to say than that.
We use words, we classify errors, we catch them, we do all those kinds of things. How do you determine what the real cost of errors are?
Okay, well, that's not trivial. Okay,
No.
People make mistakes in doing that. The most common mistake is they evaluate the cost of an error by the cost to fix it. All right. So you have to start by asking, who's paying this cost? So, for example, if you buy a piece of software that, or any piece of software, but let's say it's your cartoon software, and you pay your $10, you buy it, you put it on your machine, and it wipes out all your data everywhere. It cleans the machine, right? What's the cost of that? Right? Well, to the person who built it and is selling it, there's no cost at all, right? Or maybe they have a refund policy and they say, well, I'm not happy with it. And say, okay, here's your $10 back. So it cost them $10, right? But what does it cost you?
Significant amount.
Could be your whole fortune, could even be your life. I mean, when we have some errors documented now that have actually killed people. And but the developer didn't kill the developer. I have had a client who makes embedded software that they put into cars for power steering and brakes and so on. And then they sell this to different car manufacturers. And what they do as part of their quality program is if you had anything to do with a particular piece of software, anything at all, you might have written a help message, or you may have written code, or you may have been a tester, or whatever. You have to get in a car with that software operating and drive around their test track at 100 miles an hour. People know that they're going to do that, then the cost, that puts the cost on them. Okay. You see? So that changes the thing. If it's going to be a cost to us, like my life, I'm going to be a lot different in the way I produce the software, the way I sell it, promote it, the way I describe it, the way I help people with it and support it, so on. But in general, the true cost is not, the big costs are usually not to the developers. And so that we want to eliminate that mistake. Your customer, we have errors, and in my book I have a number of examples, and there are many more, of errors that cost somebody more than $1 billion, in addition to ones that killed people. So that's the true cost, and it may be a cost to society as a whole, right? For example, if someone produces a word processing machine, software, and it's sold to 100 million people, right? And it has a little glitch, as they call it. They say, well, there's a little inconvenience here. So when you're typing a certain thing, you may have to restart your computer when it crashes. 100 million people have one crash a day. It costs them, how long does it take you to restart your machine?
It takes me too long. Let's say it takes me 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes. So 100 million times 15 minutes. Well, let's say 15 minutes, depends on different people are doing, but take minimum wage. 15 minutes, let's say it's $2. All right? $2 times 100 million people a day means this error, or this glitch, as they call it, is costing the world $200 million a day. Okay? But do the developers care? Apparently not, because I can give you a number of examples like that. So, yeah.
Do they not care, or is it just too abstract? So your example about making people take the drive around the test track at 100 makes a mistake, makes an error have a very tangible outcome for them. Should the idea be to make it more tangible to the developers and the development teams?
Well, I think that is a very important way of getting better quality software. It's a kind of it's an application of what I call Ford's fundamental feedback formula, which I've written about in some of my books. Henry Ford, back in, I think, the 1920s, was testifying to Congress about pollution, because pollution is not a new thing, right? And they were particularly concerned about river pollution, factories polluting rivers, and they wanted to make laws. Many of those laws are still on the books. But Ford said, you really only need one law for a factory. If it's going to take water out of the river, it has to put the water back in the river, and it has to put it back upstream of where it takes it out. And that gives you that concern that you're talking about. In other words, if I pollute it, I'm going to have to eat it, drink it,
right,
suffer with it, get killed in the car that I'm driving, whatever. And generally, our developers very often are too isolated from the people who actually use the software that they develop. And so they simply don't see that. Years ago, I taught a class to the team that had developed the PL1 programming language, the compilers for that. This was in the old batch processing days. I was teaching them a class in how to program in PL1 because they didn't know anything about using the language that they had developed the compiler for. They wrote in assembly language. And so I gave them exercises, and in one of the exercises, we were in the ready room, and one of the guys was cursing, and we said, what's the matter? And he said, look at this error message. He says, it says, in one of the arrays in your program, in one of its dimensions, one of the bounds, upper or lower, has been violated. You've seen error messages like that. And the guy he says, look, they know which array it was, which dimension it was, and whether it was too high or too low. Why this error message? And he said some other words that I won't repeat. And one of the other guys said to him, Malcolm, he said, you wrote that program.
Oh,
okay.
Excellent.
And that's always in my mind, that one example. I've seen other examples, but that was very vivid. He had no connection with the people who were using the software that he built. And so, of course, he made error messages like that. But subsequent to that, he made changes in the software. So that's what we try to do in various ways. If you're writing a word processor, we try to have you use it, of course. And I've been at many software development companies. For example, I was at I won't say the name of the company, all right, but they had a word processor that was very popular. And I was showing them some software development tools. And I used one of which was an outliner that allowed me to refine a program stepwise, keep expanding the different parts in outline form, starting top down and then eventually seeing the whole design. And some of them in the audience said, that's wonderful. Where can we get that tool? And I said, well, that's the tool that you built. It's built into your word processor, this outliner. And they didn't even know that. All right? They never used that. And actually, well, how come you don't use it? Well, we don't use our word processor. We're different.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that always the case? We're different.
Yeah, we're different. So that's if you want to do something to improve the quality of your software development organization, is find ways to get the developers and all the people involved, the testers too, downstream from their own products. Have them sit next to a user, just watch what they do and see where they're having trouble and when they're cursing and when they're happy. and so on. If you can't do that, of course they'll have no sense of what people really like and what is quality to people.
Jerry, you've had a long and varied career. So you introduced the idea of feedback loops. The newer software methodologies, the newer frameworks, things like Agile, test-driven development. Do you think, shifting the feedback loops has fundamentally changed the sort of playing field for quality, or do you think it is much the same as it has been over the past 20, 30 years?
Well, I guess what they call technically, sociologists call penetration. That is, we have software development groups in the world today who really do a marvelous job and have picked up all kinds of techniques and so on, ways of organizing, tools to use, and so forth, and produce really high quality stuff. But that's only a small fraction of the whole industry. There's a lot of, when Apple, I noticed when Apple came out with the iPad a few years ago, they said something, and I don't remember the exact numbers now because they've changed, that there were 700,000 applications for the iPad. You get that number? 700,000.
Wow.
Somebody wrote 700,000 programs. What was the quality of those 700,000? Who were those people? Most of them were pretty much useless. Nowadays, anybody can say I'm a programmer, and then they, just like anybody can say I'm a consultant. But is their consulting worth anything? Is it useful at all? Are the programs useful? Are they of quality to anybody? So we have places, and if you look around, you consult with a lot of companies, as I have, companies and other kinds of organizations, churches, governments, nonprofit, charitable organizations, and everywhere you find the same thing. Where there is this feedback, where the consequences are important and fed back to the developers, over the years they've learned to do really high quality work because it's worth something to them. I'm going through and working on a new book, and I'm going through some old articles I found, and there is an article about the quality of the software or the whole systems that we developed for Space Tracking Network for NASA, and how it was really the highest quality and everything. But they said it cost a lot of money to do it. It cost about $1,000 for a line of code. Not that lines of code are the best measure, but that was a simple idea. Mm-hmm. And not everybody's willing to spend $1,000 per line of code they produce. If you're producing this little cartoon program and you're going to sell it for $10 to 1,000 people, so you get $10,000, which sounds good, except if it costs you $1,000 a line to write it, you're just not going to do that. Right?
Well, not and stay in business.
No, right. You'll be gone in a moment. So you slap together something, and your cost might be 50 cents a line, and you get something, and maybe it shows some cartoons, and sometimes it crashes, and so on. Well, but if somebody says, this is such a great idea, and we can guarantee you 100 million customers if the thing worked better, at $10 a piece, 100 million customers. Now it starts to be worth my while to produce a higher quality product. And that's what you go around and you look. I've been, for example, where I learn these things in my consulting, I go to a company and I see stuff and how come it's that way? So, for example, I go to a pharmaceutical company and they have a whole floor, this huge building, whole floor full of software developers. And the floor is divided by a long corridor, and there's glass windows so you can see through to each side of the corridor. And on one side, they're developing their sales analysis and their accounts payable accounts, all their accounting stuff and stuff like that, and then their HR stuff. On the other side, they're developing the software to keep track of the tests of their new pharmaceuticals, to make reports to the Food and Drug Administration. Right? Now, on that, I'm using my hands here on the right side, and I'm walking down this corridor from the elevator. On the right-hand side is the accounting people, and they produce kind of mediocre software, but it gets along kind of. Occasionally they lose some money and they forget to bill somebody, or they forget to pay a bill and this and that. On the left side are the people that are on the same pay scale, hired by the same company, and they're doing the stuff for the Food and Drug Administration. If they should make a mistake in the evaluation of a drug, the Food and Drug Administration catches them, they decertify this thing. It could cost them $10 billion. The quality of the software they produce on the left is way, way higher than what they produce on the right. All right? Right in the same building, same organization, same hiring people the same way, and so on. So to me, when I saw that the first time, physically in the same room or same building, I said, okay, why are they different? And it's because of the feedback, the consequences of what they're doing, that they know, and it's made clear to them that if you screw up over here on the left, then it could cost us the whole company, right? Or people could die because we misevaluate a drug. People could die, which would then cost us the whole company because they'd sue us. But even if it wasn't with lawsuits, we don't want to kill people. That's not what we're doing. So it's like driving the cars around the track. Okay, take the medicine that you are keeping track of, the tests and so on. Deep down, that's what it is. And whether you call your stuff agile or fragile or anything else, the fact is, that worries me most. I mean, I've been called the grandfather of the Agile movement. And I can show you stuff that I wrote 50 years ago. It's all there, but we didn't have one name for it. So giving it a name and a manifesto has helped people to become aware of stuff, and it's helped people a lot, those who use it, right? Mm-hmm. But first of all, you have to use it. Second of all, a certain number of people, they see, I'm looking at your notes here, I see Agile is capitalized. If we put a capital A on the word Agile and stick that in front of in our documents, then our software would be better. That's all we have to do. I mean, if you think that, you think of it some kind of magic. We've seen that before. There have been movements over and over and over again. There's structured programming, there's lean programming, there's top-down, there's this and that and this and that. And they give various names. It's always the same stuff. I mean, you have to have this feedback. You have to have customer involvement, which is part of the feedback. And so on. I could go through all the Agile Manifesto, as I've done in another book of mine. Well, I go around and I see a team that's using Agile. And I say, oh, you're using Agile? Oh, yeah, pretty much everything. I go, what do you mean pretty much everything? And they say, well, we don't use this customer representative or whatever they call it. We don't use that because the customers can't spare anybody. And I said, then you're not doing Agile. You've just cut off, right? You've cut off your feedback. You can't just pick and choose each part of it. This is a wonderful system in theory, but if you don't do it all, then it isn't going to help you. And that's been the same thing for 50 years with each new thing. It's like, well, we're going to do it. And of course, we have our own version. And I remember one place, technical reviews are a big part of Agile, and they've been a part of our work for a long time. So I go to a place and I say, do you do technical reviews? And they say, oh, yes, we do it almost all the time. And I say, what's the key word in that sentence?
Almost.
Almost, right? And I say, well, when don't you do it? He says, well, occasionally we just don't have time. We schedule. And I say, well, why are you not meeting a schedule? Well, some pieces of the development just are running behind. And I said, why are they running behind? Well, I don't know. I said, well, let's go talk to the people who have done this. You talk to the people. What do you find? Why are they running behind? Yes.
Well, could be a lot of things, right?
No, it's always one thing. They made mistakes, errors.
Okay.
Right? And they're trying to fix them or doing stuff over. It's always errors. Oh, well, once in a while somebody gets sick and dies, but which is another kind of error. We're not talking. But basically all the time it's errors. So what you're saying to me, translate what the guy said. I said, you're saying, well, we always do technical reviews unless we have some piece of code that's particularly full of errors. And then we don't review it. That's your software development process.
So how did they react to that? I mean, that puts it in fairly bleak or, right in their face.
Once or twice, they just throw me out. That's a reaction. And I had one company did that, and 6 months later, they were out of business. I could see it coming. Others do something. I don't know what they do, because when they throw me out, I don't know what happens afterwards. But the majority of the time, they say, well, that's pretty rough, but they see it. They get it. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay. And I said, now, what you can do about that, first of all, the simplest thing is to just reverse it. And if you want to save time and energy, don't review the things that are on time. Just review the things that are running behind, and you'll do a whole lot better. But, of course, you should still review everything, because you don't know. Something could be running on time because they're just ignoring errors.
Right.
But, in the consulting business, you have to convince people and so on. And of course, I try to soften it for them. But a sense of humor is very important. So most of the time I do this in a way, I say, well, it's just kind of funny, because I do the same kind of thing. Sometimes I don't realize the consequences of the policy that I have. And your policy, which is not even an explicitly stated policy, it's just like we make an exception. Oh, these guys are running behind schedule. Okay, I'm the manager. Got to make the schedule. Got to speed it up. Let's skip the testing. Let's skip the reviewing. And you didn't realize it. That's all. So this is why you pay me. And if you're not satisfied, then don't pay me. It's the same guarantee. But they're usually satisfied if I do it. What I haven't been able to do, I'm just not that good a writer or something, is just put that in a book, and then everybody who reads the book gets it and does something different. Most people can just ignore stuff that they read in a book. Only the better ones can read it and say, oh yeah, I was doing that. My fault. I'm going to fix it. That's what I hope for, and I get some of that. I had a nice review today where I can give you the guy's blog where he's just said this was the year of Jerry Weinberg. Because This year he read 8 of my books, and it's totally changed his whole career.
Well, that's fantastic. So you mentioned that you're in the middle of your next book. So you want to foreshadow that a little bit?
It's a book I've been trying to work on for 50 years, and it may never come out. But it's a book on design. I've just come out with, after the Eras book, I've come out with a book on management. How to be a better manager. That's out now. But one of the things I'm doing now with ebooks, I've learned I can put out a book like the book on management. I don't know everything there is to know about management. I probably know less than 1% of what there is to know about management. But I do know some things that have been helpful. So I'm thinking if I have something useful to say, I'll add it to the ebook, and everybody who bought it gets updated if they want. So I don't have to fully understand the subject. And that I realized that was holding me back on design, because I've done a lot of consulting on design. A lot of it's been very helpful, just like on errors. And so I'm thinking right now, I have a working title of the book is something like Useful Consulting Ideas About Design. Not all ideas about design, or here's the right way to design, anything like that. It's now I've got together, I think, a sufficient number of things that would, if you were a designer, you would read this and occasionally you'd run across something. A very good friend of mine, one of my students for many years, wrote a review of a book in software engineering. And he said, this book is a gold mine. And that's a nice thing to say about a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to him, the reviewer, and I said, Dan, that was very nice. And I got the book, and it's got some good stuff in it. He said, but how come you've reviewed some of my books, and you've read a lot of them, how come you never said they were gold mines? And he said, well, see, you don't understand what a gold mine is like. In a gold mine, you dig tons and tons of dirt, and you find a couple of little nuggets of gold, right? And your books aren't like that. Your books are like coal mines. Every shovelful has got something worthwhile in it. I thought,
interesting.
Okay. I said, I guess that's what I do. That's what I'm trying to do. It's just like in my consulting. I always tell people, I come there, I spend a day there, it costs you a certain amount. If you don't think it was worth that, don't pay. Or I give you your money back. I want every visit to be worthwhile. It's like meetings. People complain about meetings. I want every meeting that I'm in to be a worthwhile meeting. If it's not going to be worthwhile, then let's not have the meeting. If a chapter is not going to be worthwhile to a large number of people that are buying the book, then don't put it in the book. And so that's how I work.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Jerry, this has been absolutely wonderful and everything that I would hope it to have been. If you woke up tomorrow morning and you had the power to change any two items in the software development world, what would those two things be and why?
Well, I would. First thing that comes to my mind is similar question. Somebody once asked me in an interview, what would you say was your biggest contribution to the computing field? And I said, it just came to me that I've never invented a programming language. Okay. So in one sense, one possible thing that would affect things would be to stop people developing more new programming languages. We have thousands of them, and we don't need thousands of programming languages. But we can ignore them, so that's not the most important thing. If I had the power to change two items, the first thing I would change is to eliminate my power to change things just by my ideas. I'd get rid of that power right away. That'd be the first thing, because nobody's that smart. You can't follow anybody blindly in what they're saying, what they're doing. I've made many mistakes, many errors in my career. So I guess the second thing I would change, well, I guess I'd have to change it first, because once I change the other thing, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would change how people respond to when they make mistakes, and get them to respond with, you may have to edit this out, but I teach people, they get to say, when you make a mistake, something goes wrong, you get 30 seconds when you can say, oh shit. All right? I mean,
this is a podcast. I don't have to edit anything on that end.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the way you feel. I mean, you get this mistake comes back, and somebody reports to me an error in one of my books. That's my first response. And just do that, and then you're done with that. And now you can have the happiness that the error has been revealed, and now I can fix it. Now I can make it better. And I try to get my students, my clients to do that. And we would make a lot more progress that way. Just take it. I made a mistake. We made a mistake, whatever. What do we have to do to fix it, and what do we have to do so we don't make the same mistake again in the future? And if we would all do that, even a large number of us would do that, then the profession would move ahead faster. It has moved ahead a long way in the last 50 years, but only when people do that. They say, okay, let's face up to it. We made mistakes. Let's fix it and let's move on. And I guess that's the one thing I would change, and then I would take away my power and anybody else's power. We're still in this phase, still in this stage. If you look at the development of a technology, the example that I found a few years ago was the steam boiler business. Back in the early 19th century, they invented steam boilers, and which was a very powerful thing because you could run trains, you could run heating systems, you could generate electricity. And at that time, there were a lot of explosions. Steam boilers would blow up and kill people and stuff. And the study made over 130 years, I think, at the time, that the reliability of steam boilers measured by comparing the number of deaths in a year versus the total amount of capacity. First of all, if it had stayed the same over those 120 years, everyone in the world would be dead 1,000 times from steam boiler explosions. So clearly that didn't happen. What happened was the safety of steam boilers, getting rid of errors that caused accidents, safety increased by a factor of 10 to the 15th power. It's incredible. But this was over 130 years. In the computer business, computers are now more widespread than steam boilers, and people are wasting time and getting mistakes made for them over and over again. The billions of them. I see where Apple yesterday was announcing they just sold their 1 billionth iPhone, which is a computer. And we've only been at this with iPhones for a decade, and with computers generally for only maybe 50, 60 years. And I've been around almost the whole time. We have a long way to go. So we have to accept that we're where we are, and we have to move by fixing the things we're not doing well. That's the thing that I would change.
Fantastic. Jerry, how would people continue the conversation with you? Where would they find you on the web? How would they continue this discussion?
Okay, well, I have 2 websites, one for my fiction and one for all of my stuff. The fiction one they can find through the principal one, which is geraldmweinberg.com. And they have to put the M in there, my middle initial, because some pirate bought the website without my middle initial and was selling stuff that I had nothing to do with. geraldmweinberg.com. And they'll find how to reach me there by email and so on. And I'm happy to start communicating with people. I do that every day. And it's how I learn things and how they learn things. And I love it.
As I said, this has been absolutely magnificent. And as you know, Jerry, at the end here, I open up the platform for you to promote anything that you like. You've provided a lot of incredible information to the listeners of the Software Process and Measurement Cast. The platform is yours to promote anything you'd like.
Well, read my books. And you can find all my books at several vendors' sites as ebooks. And you can also find most of them as what we call dead tree books, where you can paper. And you can find them through my website or just look me up. I try to keep all my books on one place, leanpub.com. So you go there. You get a page where you see all my books on. Today I have 46 books up there, and you can get them in various formats. And they're a good publisher. I'm trying to help them out. They do some really interesting things. But if you prefer Amazon or Smashwords or Barnes & Noble, they have most of my books, not everyone. The other thing, I'm now with Esther Derby, we're now doing just one of my workshops, the most popular one that we've been It's on leadership. We call problem-solving leadership workshop. And because it's leadership that we need to make our profession better. And we run this a couple times a year. It always sells out in the first hour after we announce it. So we watch for it. Contact me or Esther and say you'd like to be notified as soon as we announce the next class, and you might have a chance to get in. But and of course, like everything else, it comes with the same money back guarantee. So, and then I'll be there, and we can be face to face and share learning.
Jerry, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for appearing on the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
So, thank you for giving me this way to communicate with people. And I really like what you're doing.
This is not part of the re-release. The poll for the next book in the series has begun. There are 2 books in the list I have not read. I am planning to read them, and they have been highly recommended. Therefore, I would be happy to read them with you rather than reread them with you. I'll close the poll when I leave radio silence on August 28th. On the blog, we're going to highlight our reread of The Goal by Ely Goldratt. Check out the reposting of one of the most popular entries, and then grab your copy and read along with that reread. In upcoming events, Tom Henricksen delivers one of the most innovative online conferences. This year, he's upped the bar again. Please join the Premier Agile Online Conference from October 25th to 27th. Register, link in the show notes. Next week on the Software Process and Measurement Cast will be the second week of our summer holiday. We'll feature another interview from the archives, Show 37, really going back, knocking the dust off. Show 37 was my first interview with Ed Yurden. We discussed Web 2.0, and even though we're past Web 2.0, I think the whole concepts are really important that we talked about. I have titled the interview Collaborate or Die, which really is a good reason to really reconsider what Ed was saying. A bit over the top, you say? Who knows? By the way, Ed died in January of 2016. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?